Welcome to the Punting is Winning podcast. Just two fans talking all things Hawkeyes. Here are your hosts, JD and Keith.
Back, Hawkeye fans, to Punting is Winning, the All Iowa podcast. I am your co-host, Keith, along with my co-host, JD. We are going to talk a little bit about the defense this week. We talked a little offense last week, but first we want to cover the question of the week last week, which was, ironically, nobody answered because I don't know if nobody really had a specific one or couldn't remember, whatever. I know you said you couldn't remember exactly what your first Hawkeye game was, but we asked what your first Hawkeye experience was live, any sport, and I know mine was in 1989. Iowa played Michigan State for homecoming. Iowa lost that game 17-14, but at that point I was very hooked on going to games. And I was a senior in high school at the time, or actually I had just graduated high school. And it was a situation where I wish I'd had the money then, because I would have started getting my tickets a lot sooner than I did. I didn't start getting tickets until 2000. But yeah, that was my first game, but not my first experience. And I'm gonna let you talk about that first.
Yeah, my first experience was in I want to say it was 1978 or 79. Our local, back in the day, they had a punt, pass, and kick. I don't know what it's called now. It's something, but punt, pass, and run maybe, or similar to that. Anyway, I had won that competition locally, and my regional competition was in Iowa City at Kinnick Stadium. And I remember it being a very cold day in November, I want to say, or late October. Must have been a Saturday when Iowa was out of town, and it was cold, and we sat up in those seats up there in a turf field back then. It was hard as a rock down there and cold, and being 11 or 12 years old, whatever it was that I just didn't have any vitriol to want to stay and freeze. So I went out there and I did my punt, my pass, and my kick, and I said, I'm cold, let's go. We'll find out how we did later, and we did. And but we sat behind those little columns that people run in and out of the little tunnels, and not just the fans. We sat behind one of those to try to stay out of the wind, and it was brutally cold that day, and it was not a lot of fun. But that was my first ever experience of anything regarding the University of Iowa when I was I think 12 years old. So that was it. And I think you were there too. So
yeah, the irony was that you had won the 12-year-old bracket and I had won the 8-year-old bracket that year. So we were both up there for the same reason. And I remember I finished 9th. I remember that. I don't know what you finished.
No,
it was not a good day because it was so windy and so cold. And like you said, I was just ready to get out of there. Being an 8-year-old kid who wasn't used to the elements at that point, I just was wanting to get out of there. And like you said, it was hard as a rock. It was almost like a field was frozen down there. But quite an experience though. It was an eye-opening experience for us as kids to be able to be on the field at Kinnick Stadium. And this was the first year that Hayden Fry had been at Iowa. So, Iowa was not very good up to this point. And I think that kind of, that with Hayden Fry, and to me, Hayden Fry was the savior of Iowa football in my book. Yeah. And I think a lot of people's book is he couldn't have asked for a better person to come in and take over that program at that point in time. But I love his euphemisms, and he kind of reminded me a little bit of Yogi Berra. Some of the you talk about the Yogi-isms. This baseball's a game where it's 90% mental and the other half is physical. That's the type of guy that Hayden Fry was, but not quite to the extent of what Yogi Berra was. Yogi Berra was almost to the point where he's made him sound stupid, but he really wasn't. Yeah. Hayden was never like that. Hayden was just down home. He embraced the Iowa culture, and he embraced the southernness of himself, and he just let that personality just be brought out in
shine
his,
through. Yeah.
it shined. And I'll never forget that he told a story at a Fridays one time, and it was, he had come up with, I want to say, who was it Bill Brazier, I think, came up with him from SMU or North Texas. I don't remember for sure where he was at. And Iowa was playing somebody, and just, they weren't getting beat. They were getting beat, but they weren't doing too bad. And Iowa scored a touchdown, and the crowd just erupted. And, it was just into it the whole day. There was, 66,000 people there at the time. And Brazier looks over at Hayden Fry and he says, "Wow, these guys are passionate fans." And he says, "Yeah, imagine what they would do if we were winning." And then he brought that winning culture to Iowa, and you could just see that the fan base just was reinvigorated at that point. So I love Hayden Fry, and I will always say to the day I die that Hayden Fry is the reason I became a true Hawkeye fan.
Right. Yeah, he definitely was the savior of the football program. We had struggled. Iowa had struggled in the years prior to that. When Evashevsky left, things kind of started to spiral. And, every year you kind of thought, it can't get worse, and it seemed like it did. And some of those Cummings and Jerry Burns and Lauterbur, just pitiful. Just pitiful.
And, and the thing of it is that those guys were really before our time.
Yeah.
But we know about them. We can see, we can read the records. We know what Iowa football was like after Evashevsky. So,
yeah.
But, in their defense, let's talk about defense.
Okay.
So let's talk about the Iowa defense. This is one of those situations where we kind of know what we're getting here. We've got 9 guys back on defense from last year that have starting experience. There's not a position group on that defensive side that I'm not comfortable with. Maybe the exception of corner. And not so much that I'm not comfortable with them. I'm just the depth. Let's bring that up here.
I'm a little concerned. When you talk about depth, I'm concerned a little about defensive line, but we'll get into that too. That would be my area of concern.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit. Let's start with the linebackers because that's kind of the most established group. Actually, you know what? Let's talk about the safeties first because that is the most established group. You got Xavier Wampa back, Quinn Schulte's back for a grad year, and Cohen Entriger is the backup for Quinn Schulte. I think he showed us what he's made of by what he did in that Big Ten title game on that missed tackle on that kickoff or that punt return. Was it punt return or kickoff return? Because it had to be a punt return.
Yeah, it had to be a punt
return
unless it was the opening.
It wasn't the start of the game. So
right.
Yeah, on that punt return where he went down and got blocked out of the play or whatever, and then he just got up and just chased that guy down and knocked him out about the 4 or 5 yard line. So I think there's depth there. I don't know a whole lot about Caleb Galeric or Zach Lutmer, the redshirt freshman, redshirt sophomore, but I trust Phil Parker to put the right guys out there, put the guys out there that are going to put them in the best position to win. So I don't feel like safety is a position that I would want to worry too much about. Now, granted, if Schulte or Wampa were hurt, I'd probably feel a little bit more concerned with it because I just don't know about the depth behind it. But from a starting standpoint, you couldn't get a whole lot better.
Yeah, it's a solid group, no question. And I think there's going to be a couple names that are going to jump out at people, especially the fans that don't have their finger on the pulse of the Iowa team pretty much 24/7 like we do. There's going to be 2 names that are going to jump out at you right at the beginning of the season that you're going to say, who is this guy? Who I've never even heard of him. John Nestor and Zach Lutmer are going to get a lot of playing time, and you've probably not heard of them, but they both flashed in the spring game. And Phil Parker has said some very good things about both of those 2 guys, especially John Nestor, and actually said some good things about Zach Lutmer as well. So you're going to see those 2 probably play in roles of backups, but they're also going to play quite a bit because I think sometimes especially when you've got teams that are notorious for passing, you're going to keep those guys. You're going to want to keep those guys at least somewhat hydrated. So you're going to need to pull them out a little bit every once in a while, or you're going to go to dime packages and you're going to have to bring in some additional defensive backs. And you're going to see Zach Lutmer and John Nestor in there, and you're not used to seeing them, but they're going to be valuable players and they're going to be good players for us.
I know they've compared John Nestor to a little bit to Riley Moss. That's not a bad comparison to be compared to. Very quality defensive back in the Big Ten, and playing for, I think he's still with Denver. Hasn't played a whole lot, but I think he was injured a lot this first year out there.
He did play.
But yeah, I would agree. Huh?
He did play some.
Yeah. Not a lot, but he did get some play. But I agree. Yeah, those are two names to keep an eye out for. Nestor being the backup at the right corner position behind Jamari Harris. Speaking of corners, Deshaun Lee and Jamari Harris, listed as the starters for now. Jamari Harris, a grad player, definitely has some experience back there. Did you miss a year with injury 2 years ago? Was back last year. Might have had a little bit of an injury issue last year. I think he miss a couple of games. Can't remember the reason why. And obviously, Deshaun Lee taking over for Cooper is going to be a huge shoes to fill.
Well, but, it is.
He's got some experience.
He's going to have to get in there and make it his own position. He's going to have to say, you know what, Cooper's not here. I'm going to have to take this over. And you got TJ Hall behind you. He's had a little experience. Right. So I'm not terribly concerned. I know there's some good guys behind them even. So, corner's not one of those that you get a high amount of injuries really, usually. So I think you're going to run with these two guys most of the year, probably, if not all the year or the whole year. Yeah. So I'm not terribly concerned about corners. Left corner, Deshaun Lee, kind of unproven, but by the same token, this is his opportunity to shine. And he could be a diamond in the rough waiting to, behind Cooper DeJean, you could have been all world, but you're never going to get ahead of him. Right. So, we could be sitting there looking at a potential very adequate replacement for him.
And like I said before, Iowa has a history of putting defensive backs into the All Big Ten picture. So I trust Phil Parker to have the right guys out there. So, this is why the defense is so much easier to talk about, because there's so much trust in what Phil Parker does, and he's done it for so long and he's done it so well that you just look at it and say, yeah, okay. Yeah, I get that. It just makes sense. And, I think there's a lot of quality corners on this team, quality defensive backs. Again, this is just what we have listed. There's still guys that are even further down the depth chart that I think have a chance to shine. Yeah.
It's really a young group other than the starters and the backups. I mean, if you go down through the roster and look at the defensive backs, and I did this earlier, I mean, it's a lot of redshirt freshmen and sophomores on this list, and a few freshmen at the bottom that have no playing time, of course, because they're just incoming. But you really got a lot of young guys that are untested, unproven. We haven't seen them play. They might be fantastic, and they might be, right. They're going to learn from these older guys. And, maybe in the years coming, next year or the year after, that's their time to shine. And providing they don't transfer away or get injured and can't play anymore, you got to look at these guys. It's their time in a couple of years, and they may be outstanding. Yeah. And we, forget about these other guys, but you've got a lot of youth in this group after your top guys.
Yeah, I think of a guy like a Josh Jackson who, played behind some good corners and then had that one, the 1 year that he was in the starting lineup was great. Was able to go pro right after that year. So
right.
We just don't know on all of these guys. Just give them the chance to run out there and do what they need to do, and we'll see what happens. So, but again, like I said, it's Phil Parker's defense, and I trust Phil. I trust him probably more than any other assistant coach that I've ever seen on a football field at this point in time. He's done it for so long and has done it at a high level for so long that he has earned
Yeah.
that trust from us
He
fans. And
he definitely has proven himself to me, and I'm not terribly concerned. I know that he could judge talent way beyond anything I could even dream of. I mean, he's probably forgot more about football than I'll ever know.
oh yeah,
So you just have to you trust in that he can get in the right guys and teach them the system, and that they can thrive in it. And he's done it so far since 2015. Iowa's had a very salty defense every year.
yeah.
So
And even
you go
before
with
that, he's always had good defenses.
yeah, and even before that, when Norm was there, he had good defenses. But Phil's taken it, I think, it's a little step further, even.
Yeah. So speaking of taking it a step further, let's talk a little bit about the linebackers. They are the ones that are the engine that drives this defense,
Yeah,
in my opinion. We've got middle linebacker Jay Higgins back, who is just phenomenal.
All-American.
All-American, yes. Nick Jackson's another one that's an All-American.
Yeah,
When we are in a three linebacker situation, Tyler Fisher at the um, strong side, or the Leo linebacker, whatever it is. We listed as cash, but it's actually a linebacker position when cash isn't there. So there's three right there, three very good linebackers on the field at one time. And I say Kyler Fisher is a lot better than people will think, because he's got a lot of experience. Yeah, he might be a walk-on, but Iowa is kind of a university known for building up those walk-ons and turning those guys into all Big Ten caliber players. And I think he's one that has toiled through the 5-6 years or whatever it is now, that it's his time. And I hope he has a chance to really shine. I don't foresee us being a ton of three linebacker sets. I see us more in that two linebacker with the cash position, just based on the simple fact that a lot of the offenses in the Big Ten are more spread offenses. Obviously, there are still some more conventional style offenses where the three linebackers are necessitated, or more run-oriented downs that you can put them in there. I wouldn't hesitate having Sebastian Castro in there as a third linebacker either. So, it's the cash, more of that, I guess, nickel. I mean, lack of a better term, he's kind of a nickel corner or nickel back, so to speak, but can play more like a safety in that position with as a linebacker, able to cover better than a linebacker because he's got a little bit more coverage skills. So to me, I think Sebastian Castro could be a guy that's listed as a cash, but is more of he's the hybrid linebacker safety style that I would keep out there. You could keep out there all 4 downs, because he hits like a Mack truck too, and it's just solid.
We talk about linebackers, we talk about free safeties, and if you talk about okay, so Sebastian Castro to me is the most unheralded, unsung hero of this team.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he is, and I know I'm going to get flack for this because of Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson, but I think he's the MVP of the defense. Just for what he can do, his utilitarianism, his versatility. He has so many things, and he's just so unsung. He started getting a little accolades towards the end of the year. People are starting to notice him a little bit. But wow, he has been fantastic his time at Iowa, and I don't see that changing. And I really do see him stepping up even in his senior year, and even outdoing what he did in his junior year. It's just, I honestly, this is the guy that I look at if we need a fourth down, or stop on third down, or stop on fourth down. This is the guy that I always look to say, if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be him. But now, don't get me wrong, I think Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson are fantastic players. But I look at Sebastian Castro as he's kind of the oil on the engine that makes it run, and keeps it from freezing up. He is my guy, and I think he's going to be outstanding, and I don't know why he wouldn't be an All-American this year. And he could be. I don't know. I hope he doesn't get, that word hurt, but wow.
Yeah.
He is so good. He's going to make a great pro, and he's going to start right off. He's just that good.
Well,
everything he does is just so technically perfect.
Yeah. you think about the guys that have played the cash position at Iowa, uh, Hooker, Amani Hooker, Dino Stone. Um,
Yeah, where are they at right now? They're playing pro ball on Sundays.
exactly. Yeah, and they're guys that play like linebackers with coverage skills. That's basically what they are, and that's what Iowa built them to be.
He's just next in line.
And you talk about some of the depth behind those guys. Even Carson Sherrar, we saw him at spring practice, and we're both very impressed with him.
Look good.
Yeah, Jaden Harrell is another guy that has just kind of, probably could have been in the rotation the last 2 years, and it's just hard with the guys that they've had ahead of them.
Right.
But I think he's going to be a quality backup as well. And Jackson Rexroth, he is another guy that's kind of building that same mold as like the Monty Hookers and the Geno Stones and the Sebastian Castros. Playing that cash position, he's got that build, he's got that mentality, he's got those skills. When Iowa went to the cash position, I was ecstatic when that happened, because I thought, we've been getting, for lack of a better term, we've been getting boat raced by teams that could run that slot receiver out there and line him up against the slower linebacker. And now that you've got guys that have those coverage skills that can play like a linebacker but can run like a safety, you're not able to do that as much, and that just has made Iowa's defense even that much better. So yeah. I'm not worried. This is definitely a position group I am not concerned with, even with some good depth behind. I think there's even guys behind Terrar and Harrell that are quality linebackers in this group. So I'm not worried about that position.
You look at 25, and I don't want to look too far ahead, but if you look at 25 with what we're losing, you're losing your two top linebackers, obviously, and your cash guy. There's bound to be a step back a little bit, but I think the guys behind them are going to be good. They're just waiting in the wings to do their thing. And, we could be talking about Jaden Harrell, like we're talking about Jay Higgins next year.
Right.
So you've got to there's got to be a little bit of level of positivity coming in to the next year, even though we're losing some really great players at the end of the season. So, there's reason to be excited. There's reason to be positive. And I know that, we talked about this a second ago, but Phil Parker, we'll have him ready to go. And I think it's normal that it would take a little step back, because I think you're looking at an Iowa defense that as a whole might be one of the best that Iowa's ever put out on the field.
Yeah,
I'm not saying every position's the best that we've had, because linebacker, you've had Abdul Hodge and Chad Greenway. that's pretty tough to get by. Josie Jewell and some of those guys
Jack
have been
Campbell.
Pretty outstanding. Not saying that Nick Jackson and Jay Higgins aren't right there, but as a whole group, they might be. You could argue it that they might be the best defense, especially of the Kirk Ferentz era, and that's pretty high praise.
Yeah. And we talk about Jay Higgins, and you think about the fact that he is so good at what he does, and had to play behind a guy like Jack Campbell, who was so good at what he did. So it's you got a lot of these guys who you look at the back, and I'm talking specifically on backups right now, that you're like, oh, this guy, I've really heard good things about him, and we'll get to that here with the defensive line, because I think there's some backups on that defensive line that I have heard some really, really good things about, that just haven't had a chance to show it, because the guys in front of them have always been really, really good. In getting into that defensive line, the guys that I think of that I've heard a lot of people talking really high praise about is Jeremiah Pittman and Brian Allen.
Yeah.
And right now they're two backups. They're playing behind Y.A. Black, who really, really took a step forward last year. Kind of got that his feet underneath him. It seemed like a guy that when he first got into the lineup needed to kind of figure himself out, and it's not that he was not where he was supposed to be, but I think he was in that thinking stage when he first started, and now he's in the reacting stage or dictating stage. He's dictating, like, we talk about dictating tempo in basketball or even in baseball. Sometimes you dictate the tempo. I think he's in that point where he's dictating what he's going to do with the offensive line. That was not the case 2 years ago. Not to say that 2 years ago he wasn't good. It's just now he's gotten to that point where it's such. We talk about muscle memory a lot. We talked about it when we were interviewing you, and he's got that now. And so you got a guy like Jeremiah Pittman playing behind him. And again, Pittman and Allen are going to get plenty of snaps this year because the defensive line is a position where they really like to rotate to keep those guys fresh. Because those are the guys that seem to maybe wear out a little bit quicker throughout the game or throughout the season, just because it is a more physically demanding position on the defense than most of the others. But there are some very good backups there. And, you look at Brian Allen behind Ethan Hurkett. Ethan Hurkett has shown that he is a very good defensive end. So to me, I know you talked a little bit about how the defensive line might be a concern for you just because of some of the guys we've lost over the last couple of years. I honestly see the defensive line as probably being the most talented depth-wise.
And see, I think they're a little bit weak depth-wise. I'm not saying that the guys behind the starters are not worthy, but they're just inexperienced. And I just, if you lose Aaron Graves, you've got Luke Gaffney coming in. He hasn't played much. So I worry about experience in that. I think, you talked about the backups of the defensive line and you talked about Brian Allen. I think Brian Allen's the next star. I really do. Mm-hmm. I think he'll be the next star coming in. He's going to replace Ethan Hurkett, obviously, because Ethan's going to be a senior or is a senior. He probably has another year if he wanted it. But I just look at Brian Allen and I just think this guy's going to be a star. He really is. And he's just waiting there, ready to get his opportunity. And there's a couple of other guys. Max Llewellyn's a good player. We've seen a little bit out of him. Jeremiah Pittman, we've seen some stuff out of him. We've seen him play quite a bit. So there's obviously room for opportunity here. But I think you're going to look at Brian Allen and say, wow, where's this guy been? And he's been there. He's just biding his time, waiting to get on the field in a more, to take more consecutive plays instead of just in for one or in for two and then back out for a series. You're going to see him when he starts getting more consistent playing time. He's really going to shine. I think he's got a lot of upside, and I'm excited for his future as well.
That's why I said I'm less concerned for me personally about the defensive line and the depth behind the defense. So the starters is just, I think there's just so many guys that can step in that have some experience. Brian Allen, Jeremiah Pittman, Max Llewellyn have all played a fair amount. Now, I'm not saying that they're, obviously they're not haven't played starters minutes or starter snaps, so to speak, but they have played quite a bit as backups in the past. Some of these guys have been third string backups, but that is a position that Iowa is not afraid to rotate 8 to 10 guys deep sometimes just to keep them fresh. Now, no offense to Luke Gaffney, but I just don't know enough about him. I don't know that I've seen him out there enough to talk about what kind of contributions he's going to bring. Obviously, being a second string backup at this point as a redshirt sophomore, he must be pretty decent, because I don't think, it's a situation we talked about it where you have to earn the trust of Phil Parker to get to that position. And if you get to that position and he thinks you're good enough to play there, then I think you're good enough to play there. So I know I'm heaping a lot of praise on Phil Parker, but there's a reason why. He is just that good at his job. Mm-hmm. And when you're that good at your job and you can identify those guys, I'm never going to question that. Like you said, he's forgotten more about football than I'll ever know. And I consider myself a fairly knowledgeable football person, having coached it at low levels and trying to teach it to kids coming up and getting into the high school ranks and just understanding, fundamentals of that positions. I've done the offensive line. I've done running backs and quarterbacks and whatnot. But Phil Parker is, obviously he's doing it at almost the highest level that you can do it at. I mean, depends on how you look at it. Some college assistants are higher level than professionals, in my opinion, depending on the team. If you're talking, well, I'm a linebacker or a defensive coordinator for, who's the worst team in football besides the Raiders? Probably Washington. And I've been the defensive coordinator there. Yeah, I'd say Iowa's a step up from that to me. But that's subjective, and that's we've talked about that when we talk about music, is how things can be very subjective from one person to the next.
Yeah,
we proved that over the weekend when we did our root beer challenge. That things are very subjective. Your tastes in root beer are different than my taste. So,
and what you think you like, and then when you get a blind taste test, it doesn't always go the way you think it will.
Yeah, it is very shocking sometimes, the results. So, the defense.
Let's drop down. Can we drop down and do special teams before we take off?
Yeah, we can.
Do you have special teams up there?
Together. I didn't put that tab together. I'll have to do it this way.
Yeah, just right underneath there.
Give you a little bit of. I
don't think there's a lot of controversy on this one at all as far as who's doing what. But I wanted to kind of real quickly go over. I want to pull the reins back a little bit on some people. We were spoiled, I think, when we had Tory Taylor punting. And we thought, well, we're just going to put a new guy in there and he's going to do just the same thing. Well, I think he will over time, but I don't think he will this year. He's never played professional or intercollegiate football. He's never played football, period, American football. So, I mean, there's going to be a little bit of ups and downs, I think, with him. I think there's going to be times when he's going to punt 70 yards. There's going to be other times when he shanks one about 30 or 25 or even 15.
Yeah.
And then there might be other times when he just doesn't catch the ball and gets tackled. He doesn't even get a chance to kick. It's just things that, not having ever been in the game and having been done this before, I think we got to pull the reins back. I don't think he'll lead the Big Ten in punting. I don't think he'll this year. He might down the road, but I think it's just because of lack of experience. And I know that they will be working with him quite a lot to get him to where he's comfortable and that they're comfortable with him. But the upside on him is very high. I just think we need to temper our excitement about the punting team, especially him, a little bit and lower our expectations a little bit. There's going to be a learning curve. He's going to have struggles. There's going to be games when you're like, we really need you to get a 55, 60 yarder out of this. And he's not going to do it. He's going to get like a 35 yard end over end that he didn't hit well. It's just, you've got to take the ups and the downs with a young guy, freshman in that position, especially when Iowa as a team tends to rely as much as they do on that position. As in the past, I hope not as much this year coming forward, but in the past, that's, punting is winning. We've talked about this many times, and Iowa has really relied on field position and punting, and he's no Tory Taylor. He might get to the Tory Taylor or even above status, but he's not there yet, and I think we just need to calm down on him a little bit. And I'm not, I'm excited about him, but I'm also a little bit nervous
cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm a little nervous about some of the things. I think we're going to have ups and downs, like I said.
Yeah. And, we had the benefit of going to these spring practices and seeing the punters up close and personal, so to speak. Ty Nissen, I thought he kicked a very nice ball. The thing that I would say about him was I thought his approach and delivery was a little slow, and that there's a very good chance of getting blocked. Ironically, Reese was the one that got the one blocked during the spring. But I remember was it a punt block or was it a field goal block? Might have been a field goal block. And that might have been Drew Stevens. But
There
I
was
do
a
think
kick
that,
block, a field goal
yeah,
block.
because I think it was Devin Hilson that blocked it,
Oh,
or Zach Letmer blocked it, and Devin Hilson picked it up, whatever, one of the cases. But, that was the one thing, that was the one knock that I had on Ty Nissen. I thought he kicked a very nice ball
mhm.
and pretty spiral. I just thought his approach and delivery was just a little slow, and I had that just feeling in my gut that something, that it's going to get blocked
Mhm.
if you don't speed that up just a little bit. And we've talked about timing, especially we talked about it with the offensive line and how timing is so important, especially with the zone blocking and knowing to get out to a specific spot. And if that the snap is just a slight bit delayed, that throws the timing of the whole offensive line off, and that's going to kill a play. And that's the same situation with hunters. Timing, you get that timing there, and you can be the best punter in the world, but if you're just a little slow and you get it blocked, it doesn't matter. And I just, that's the one thing I would say about him. I did like the way Reese kicked, but we did see a couple of shanks in that spring, and that's that's the cause for, I don't want to call it concern, but something to keep an eye on,
Mhm.
like you said. And you think back to a few years ago, and I remember it was a game against Wisconsin, I believe, where the ball was snapped, cold day. Before he dropped the ball, picked it back up, kicked it. I don't know, kicked it on the ground. I think he tried to pick it up and then kicked it on the ground, and ended up being an illegal kick. And think I don't think Wisconsin made it. I don't think they scored out of that, because I think we actually intercepted the ball in the end zone on that one, maybe, but could be wrong. But that's a situation where he was in a position where he wasn't used to, and he just did what instinct came to him. Maybe the soccer instinct picked up, and he just kicked it. And I mean, heck of a kick. Don't get me wrong, but an illegal kick, and that's the things you're probably going to see, that you might have cause for concern when it comes to Reese. But I'm less concerned about him than I think maybe you might be. Um, my expectations are tempered, though. I'm not expecting him to go out there and supplant um, Torrey Taylor, or be the next. Gosh, I just had his name on the tip of my tongue.
Ray Guy or
No,
Reggie Roby?
KG Roby. Yeah. Gosh, why couldn't I think that? I don't expect that,
Mhm.
but uh, just equality. Just give us a 40-yard average in most situations, and the defense will take care of the rest.
Mhm.
So you just have to be good at your task right now. You don't have to be phenomenal. Next year might be a different story.
Yeah.
You might have to be a little bit better, and you assume that as the
You will
years and
be.
the talent and the experience go by, that he will get better.
Yeah.
So, as far as
So
place kicker goes,
yeah, let's drop down.
yeah, I was dead set on Drew Stevens as the number one, and it's clear. Trip Woody has accuracy, but he doesn't have the distance yet.
Right.
So, and he's just a freshman. So I'm not expecting him to go out there and be, Nate Kading. So he's got some time to learn. Drew's still just a junior. He's got another year after this. If he chooses to stick around, which I hope he does. But he did kick very good in the spring, I thought. Struck the ball well. He was the one that did get it blocked, if I remember right. But I don't know if that was him or if that was on the hold or what. We couldn't tell from where we were at. But he definitely has a stronger leg this year than he did. And I think that little episode at the end of the year where
He struggled.
he was struggling a little bit, and they brought in the kid from Central Michigan, or Western Michigan, whatever it was, that kicked that field goal against Nebraska and beat him from like 42 yards out, that just barely got over the crossbar. I think that humbled him.
Yeah.
I think that kind of made him take a step back and say, I am good, but I am not the be all end all, and I need to step it up. And I think he's done that from what I saw in the spring.
Yeah. I think we pretty much know what we have with Drew Stevens. Junior, he's been on the team a while. He did struggle, like you mentioned earlier, he struggled a little bit at the end of the season. I look for him to come back focused and with a stronger leg. I think you're going to see the kind of kicker that Iowa's used to having all through the years. And I'm not worried about him at all. I think he'll be fine. And I think we're fine with Trip Woody years going forward. I think he'll be all right too. He's young and he doesn't have the leg strength that Drew Stevens has, but then Drew Stevens didn't have the leg strength he has now when he was a freshman. It's just, it's a progression. And, you get up your junior and senior year, you're kind of almost expected to be not automatic, but I think you're expected to be pretty good. And I think he will be.
Yep. I agree.
Just hopefully we get a lot of opportunities to see him kick the ball, hopefully on kickoffs.
I'm hoping more on extra points.
And extra points, yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of that, let's drop down. We had Torrey Taylor was our holder the last couple of years. I didn't see, again, that one block is the only thing. Other than that, I didn't see any issues out of the holds in the spring. So I don't even know if we need to really go through the long snapper and the holder. Well, I did want to talk a little bit about punt return and kick returner.
Well, let's just drop back here real quick about Luke Elkin. He's a senior, unhurt. Long snappers, nobody ever hears about him unless they screw up.
Yeah, and that's good. That's the thing you want.
People don't know this kid's name, and that's a good thing. As far as he's concerned, that's a good thing. Yep. So, having a senior there is that's good. Very good.
Yep. The only time you ever want to be mentioned as a long snapper is if you're making the tackle on the other end.
You're right.
So let's talk a little bit about the punt return kick return. We have right now it's Caden Weechen on the one line for the punter and punt return and kick return with Max White if they do a two back set on the kick return, which they always do. I think this is a position where potentially a freshman could step in and get some playing time. I mentioned it last week that I think this is a spot where Brevin Dahl could get some playing time as as either a kick returner or a punt returner. And I think he has the skills to do those things. I think he is I know a lot of publications or people that I've talked to have kind of remind him of Niall Kinnick in the sense that, they're both from Adele. I know that's a poor comparison in my book to say, well, they're both in the same town, so you want to compare them. But I think from a stylistic standpoint, people have talked about how he is very Niall Kinnick-esque in how he goes about things. So he's just very solid. I would say in more modern manner, maybe he's more Cooper DeJean-esque. And if that's the case, hey, bring it on. I'd take another Cooper in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is definitely a position where I think, a kid could get in as a freshman, as a true freshman, or even a redshirt freshman from last year who could get a chance to shine if they can catch the ball and not put Iowa in a position where, you catch the ball fine, but you're not making any progress. You're running balls back that you probably shouldn't. If you're making smart decisions and you're able to catch, you can hold on to the ball. Definitely a position that, you could put a freshman in and see what they can do.
As long as he doesn't fumble the ball or have a muff, it's important. Change of possession. You don't want to throw your defense right back out there because of a muff punt, or you run it up the field, drop it, and it's fumble. Those are the kind of things that can really hurt a team. Really quickly.
And we know what happens. We know it's going to happen at some point.
And it could happen to a junior or senior. It's just but it tends to be a more significant issue when you have a younger player. Typically,
because you could give the upperclassmen a little bit of a pass that they've not had that issue. You don't know when it comes to the younger guys is that truly an issue going forward, or is it just a one-time thing? So, I would agree. But again, that's a situation or a position that I think that a younger guy could get some play. I didn't even talk about Max White back there as the other guy. Caden, I know Caden's very probably one of the fastest guys on the team. I don't know a ton about Max White other than People being very happy for him scoring a touchdown last year. I remember Cooper DeJean was very ecstatic about it. I don't know if they were just best friends and roommates, or if they played together or what. But good for him. Again, another walk-on guy. That's another walk-on success story for Iowa. And there have been so many over the course of our lifetimes when it comes to the walk-on success. I mean, I think to me the biggest walk-on success story at Iowa was always Dallas Clark. And that history of those walk-ons turning into all Big Ten caliber players or all Americans even. Bring it on. I love it.
Yeah.
They talked about eliminating walk-ons. I don't like that. I think that's something that Iowa really thrives on, those guys that can walk on. But again, that's out of our control. That's the NCAA talking about it. The NCAA, if it's the right thing to do, they won't do it. If it's the wrong thing to do, they probably will. So,
yeah. There you go, everyone. Bazinga.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's the defense and special teams. Again, those are the two units that I think we probably feel the best about.
Yeah.
I'm not as worried about the offense this year as I think as I should be, or maybe should be. I think it's definitely going to be better. I'm always been an optimist when it comes to that. I remember when Kirk Ferentz took over at Iowa, and Iowa went 1-10 the first year he was there. People were calling, "Oh, this is the worst hire," and I'm like, "Just give him time. Just give him time." You can't judge somebody off of one season when the cupboard was bare, and within 3 years, we're 11-1 and going to an Orange Bowl with a perfect conference record. So, I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen for the offense, that they're going to turn it around that quick, but I've always been optimistic and always said, you've got to give coaches the time. You got to give them the slack in the rope to let it happen, and don't just go out there the first time something goes bad and say, "Oh, well, this isn't going to work." That's a defeatist mentality in my book, and I think that's never going to help. And we've seen situations like, again, Kirk Ferentz comes to mind. Didn't look great. Didn't look like a great hire to start with, did it? But sure looks like one now, doesn't it? Yeah. So that's all I would say when it comes to being a fan and the offense. There's going to be some growing pains.
Well, absolutely.
But I think they're going to be better.
Yeah.
So,
what do you think? Do we have a question of the week for this week? We're going to wrap it up.
Yeah. First of all, let's talk about something else. If you like the content that you're hearing, the things that we're bringing, please hit the like and subscribe button. If you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, subscribe to the podcast. That way you get notifications when we drop a new episode. Try to drop a new episode every Monday for all platforms. Typically by 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, it should be out. I like to try to do it by noon, but sometimes I just can't. I can't get it into my schedule to get it out by noon, but it will be out by typically 5 p.m. Central Time. But definitely give us a like, a subscribe, give us some comments, talk to us. We love the interaction. Whatever you want to talk about, whatever you want us to talk about, let us know. But yes, let's move on to a question of the week for this week, and we'll wrap things up. I will do the question of the week this week because I think this is a good one as we're starting to get jumped back into the football season. And I want to know, who are the top 3, and please try to do this without Googling. Who are the top 3 career rushers at the University of Iowa? And the hint that I will give you is it's modern era. So when I say modern era, I'm talking Hayden Fry, Kirk Ferentz era. I mean, those guys have been head coached at Iowa for the last 45 years, so that's definitely modern era to me.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be in order. You don't have to tell me the exact order. I just want to know who the top 3 guys are, or who you think the top 3 guys are. We actually talked about it off air, and we did come up with the top 3. Not necessarily in the right order, but we did come up with the top 3. So please feel free to comment on here on Facebook and drop them into the comments or whatever on Facebook, Twitter. You should see us out on TikTok as well. I did screw up last week. One of our TikTok videos didn't have our voice. It had the stupid music voiceover, which I totally blew that one. I should have noticed that, but
We'll
I
give
don't
you a
like
pass.
I don't like those. I'm new
It's
to
fine.
the TikTok realm of trying to get things out there. So, but yeah, that's the question of the week. Let's have the career rushers, top 3 career rushers at the University of Iowa. Not necessarily in any order. Just I want to know the names. And with that,
Perfect.
we will wrap it up. And as always, go
Go
Hawks.
Hawks.